doing things a bit differently in this pod for this portion. We're going to look back over the URC regular season. And first, I'm going to go to you, Conor. Maybe you can pick out what you might have thought was a highlight of Leinster's 18 matches going back to September.
Yeah, I think this particular moment, it isn't just a highlight. I think it's a real, it's a real defining moment, as far as I'm concerned, for the entire season. And that's the Ulster game in the RDS in December. I think it was the 3rd of December. That's a game where it's 3-3 after 10 minutes, tight, niggly, what you expect from a top of the table clash, because that's what it was at the time. And I think that anyone looking back on, you look at the result and you think, oh yeah, sure, look, that's a Leinster win in the RDS, good for them. And again, taken out of context and looking at just final score. But what actually happened in that game is huge, because when Cian Healy got a red card after 17 minutes, and you're looking at being down to 14 men for 63 minutes plus whatever little bit of extras were on the end of either half, that's huge. And then Ulster go in for 3 unanswered tries, and at 35 minutes, it's 22 points to 3. And I can tell you, I was sitting in the RDS that night, and you're kind of looking, going, to be honest, I felt the same at 35 minutes in that match as I did at 80 minutes in the Bulls match this weekend, where you're just looking, going, this is not going to be pleasant. This is going to hurt, and I am not going to love what happens at the end of this game. And then you get to the championship minutes, last 5 minutes before the halftime, and I think it was Ronan Kelleher got a try just before the half, and you're looking, you're going, okay, well look, that's putting a bit of a gloss on the scoreboard. That's making us look like there's a bit of fight in this, and that's great. And then you come out in the second half, and Gary Ringrose scores 2 outstandingly good tries. Ulster get 2 yellow cards. Lowe and Porter go over for 2 more tries, and suddenly you've got a scoreline that's 38-22, and Ulster came back for a final score in the last couple of minutes to make it 38-29. But I think when you look at just that scoreline, you think that's Leinster winning at home. That's what they should be doing. But in the context of being down a player for more than 60 minutes, of being down 19 points coming in towards halftime, that's a huge turnaround. And the mindset, the mental strength that is clearly required to look at your teammates and say, all right, lads, things are a bit shit here right now, but what are we going to do to make a difference in that? And there are lots of people who'd say, well, they probably got a halftime talk from Johnny Sexton. Johnny Sexton didn't play that game. It's Ross Byrne who's at 10 for that game. And it is, as I say, it's a real defining moment, because there's that could have been a big swing at the top of the table. That's the kind of win that allows us to then at the end of the season turn around and say, you know what, you guys have all done phenomenal work for us. Take a break, and we'll take some of these guys to South Africa instead. It's a big win against the second best team in the country, and the table doesn't lie on that. And people will argue over who's behind Leinster and who's next and whatever. But if we're going just by the table, and at that point particularly, Ulster were quite close to us. There hadn't been enough time to build a big lead. I think it's a massive swing point to have denied them the opportunity to come and take a win, and so emphatically as well. To go from 19 points down to 16 points ahead, that's a huge swing. Like I say, that just the mental resolve, the resilience, the determination, the commitment, the desire. I'm running out of buzzwords here. But all of those things just adding together as a collective team, it's just an incredible turnaround, incredible win. That's one of those ones where you walk out of the RDS wishing you'd had more beer enjoy the night or whatever else, or wishing we'd had one more try just to really, really finish it off. And just a brilliant result through the season.
Yeah, definitely a big turning point in the season. All right. And what we've actually done is we've all picked out a couple of different highlights from the 18 rounds. So go over to yourself, Nathan, and I think you've picked out another game against Ulster.
Yeah, I'm going to flip this on its head a little bit and go to the game. It was a couple of weeks before. It wasn't that long of a gap, was there, between it was the first big game of the season, wasn't it? It was before Europe. It was just before the November block of international, wasn't it? I think I'm correct in saying that. I have to double check. But anyway, it was for Leinster's first big game of the year regardless, and they dominated for 60 minutes. They bullied the Ulster line-out maul, which has obviously been much vaunted over the last 18 months, 2 years. And then obviously they take Jason Jenkins off, the maul goes to pot, Ulster all the way back into the game and, nearly snatch it, and are potentially a Charlie Nathan knocking the ball out of Aaron Sexton in the corner away from potentially making that a much different result. And I just think at the time it's difficult because narratives change so much and the season is so long. But that was Leinster's first test of the year. We didn't really know where they were as a side, given the last test they had was La Rochelle, and that didn't go to plan in very dramatic late circumstances. And it was also the first time we kind of saw the reinforcement. So obviously Nato had that big moment, but Jason Jenkins had a huge game in the engine room, which is where Leinster have historically come up short against certain teams. And yes, Ulster are not the most physical team, but they have a very strong line-out maul, and Leinster demolished them for 60 minutes. And then Jenkins, like I said, Jenkins goes off. And now it's interesting now because Jenkins isn't first choice anymore, but I can remember sitting there thinking, okay, they've got their guy that has solved that engine room problem, that has solved that power deficit. Yes, they're going to be the bigger challenges against, potentially to lose this weekend, and you never know, in potentially La Rochelle in May again. But at the time, I remember thinking, yeah, they've got their guy. This is their guy who's going to partner James Ryan in a semi-final final in Europe and potentially win them a European Cup. Now, as it happens, the form of another lock has kept Jenkins out of the side, as has probably a bit of injury, which just goes to show how quickly narratives can change. But I still think at that point of the season, it was such a monumental psychological thing for Leinster, that sticks out for me. And I know one of your moments is the reason why Jenkins isn't playing, Jeff, but I still think it's worth highlighting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was brought in, and he was the kind of player with the kind of experience, especially, we're going up against the South African sides as well at other times, and that we needed. And just moving on to my one of my highlights, and it's not so much a single moment from a match, but it's more like a body of work over the season. And you've touched on the name. The name is Ross MOLONY. What I've been doing this season is I've been meaning to do this for years, and I never get around to it because I never think of doing it. But this time I've kept a spreadsheet of every Leinster selection from all the matches going through the season. And what stands out on that spreadsheet is his name, because I put a gray box in there if the guy's not selected, but he's got numbers going pretty much all the way across. Now, he wasn't on this South African tour, but of all of our first 22 matches of the season, Ross MOLONY was involved in 21 of them, including all of our first 12 matches, and actually started all of our first 5. Now, I don't like comparing current players to past ones because different eras, different styles of rugby. But Ross's path does seem to bear a lot of resemblance to that of Leo Collins, in that while there are a few ahead of him in the Irish pecking order for locks, if you could somehow take his contributions out of all of Leinster's performances, the results would definitely be affected. There's just no disputing that. I mean, over the past few years, Leinster have been castigated by pundits for not having enough grunt in our forwards. But even in that time, but especially this season, he's been there all along, providing it in spades. And it's not just his skill set. A big part of his game is his leadership. I mean, he hasn't actually worn the armband this season, but that doesn't matter. He still rallies the troops. A lot of these highlights we're talking about now are involve Leinster comebacks. And, from being sometimes 2 or more scores behind. And often it's been him, the catalyst, just by, when we've conceded a try, he's the guy there talking to everyone behind the post. He's the guy there standing at number 2 on their line out throw, getting the thrower to throw it in and putting pressure on them and getting the team behind him and all this kind of stuff. It's just all that kind of that stuff you can't, coach it's his extra leadership on the pitch. It's just his what he's provided. And it's like I say, it's the most important aspect of it. It's a body of work that's gone over the whole season. And as Nathan said, we would have assumed that Jason Jenkins would have been the obvious choice to go with James Ryan when it comes to the Heineken Cup. But the reality was, with the way the season has gone, there was nobody blinked an eye when they saw Ross Molony's name on the starting team sheet for Leinster in those knockout matches. And he's definitely in the frame. He didn't go on this tour, and he's definitely in the frame for the ones going forward. So that's my first highlight. Now we've all picked a second one. We'll go quickly through those. We'll go back to yourself, Conor. You want to have a look at that win over the Lions last week?
Yeah, look, and as I say, just to gloss quickly over it, because it's only a week since it happened. And I think for that squad of players who went out to South Africa, take the learnings from this week just gone, but watch the previous week a few times. Watch how you've brought yourself back into a game. Watch all the good work you did to go from, we scored first, and then by the time we get to the end of the first half, it's 26-14. And it wasn't long before it was, I think, 36-21 at one stage. And then to come back and be 36-all at the 80th minute and win a penalty. And it's just, again, it's back to that resilience, that willingness, that drive, that determination that I feel like it was lacking in yesterday's game, but was definitely there last week. And it just proves it's not just the older guys who have it. It's a lot of these younger guys as well. And you can maybe say that they get that from private schools or from demographics or wherever else you might want to say it comes from. But it's clearly being coached into them from very, very young and building through into their careers. It's a brilliant comeback. It's a brilliant comeback to look and say, geez, lads, we might steal a draw out of this, but actually we might even earn a win. And that's really big psychologically for these young guys to say, we can do this as well, not just the older fellas.
Absolutely. And going back to yourself, Nathan, I think we picked one. It's significant because we've been challenged a lot by the South African teams in the URC this season. And the first team we came up against is actually the next one we're going to come up against. It was the South Sea Sharks, and we had to fight to win that one.
Yeah, again, it was another massive game for Leinster. I think it was the first time. I think it was the first time a South African team had come up to the RDS since the Bulls the previous year. So a bit of trepidation about what was going on there. It was first game back after November. I think pretty sure it was Johnny Sexton's first game of the season in blue. And the Sharks put it up to them. I mean, their back three that day was electric. Afeli Fassi was amazing. Werner Koch was smashing guys and finishing scores. I think Henshaw had come back that day from injury. Am I right in saying? There was injuries during the game, and Ringrose had to shift out to the wing. Sexton was probably fired up as you ever see him playing in a URC game. That is for sure. Oh yeah. So what Ringrose was on the bench. He was in 23, and he had to come on for an injured winger. That's what it was. And yeah, Johnny played well. Gary fit in seamlessly onto the wing. He scored. I think there was a cross kick try to him at one point as well, wasn't there? That he scored, and it was just
almost as good on the wing as Josh van der Fleer.
Almost as good. Well, yeah. Was that Gloucester he scored?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just one of those games where, again, Leinster kind of took a few punches in the mouth and recovered well to still win by 20 points, which, when you actually take a step back and think about it, is ridiculous. And I feel like if there are lots of teams who, had been doing that, the reactions would be different. Whereas Leinster done that quite a few times this year now. But that was one, that and Ulster were kind of the Ulster at home that Conor was talking about earlier, were the two games where they kind of did that early on in the season. Like I said, where they took some big shots off some decent sides and ended up winning more than comfortably.
Absolutely. And just back to me now, my second and final highlight was the win over Munster at Thomond Park on Stephen's Day. I mean, that was another comeback. And for me, the feature was not only how we clawed our way back from an 8-point deficit in the second half, thanks to a couple of tap and go tries with the man down, but also how our defense kept out the home side enough to force them to score. And even if they were pressurizing our line, we kept them out, which took time off the clock. But we actually, the only way they could really score was out wide. And even that kind of helped, made the conversion difficult enough for Joey Carby that he couldn't manage it. And that left us ahead by 1 point in the end. I mean, winning there is, of course, always a highlight, but to grind one out by any means necessary it was an extra Christmas present for sure.